know what happened earlier, but I kept on messing up. And it might not have been all my fault, but what the heck, it doesn't matter. I don't know if there's anyone that cares about this Christian stuff, but I remember in 1994 when we were going around the country talking about Doe having been the return of Jesus, and our posters were all geared to that subject matter. That at one point at a meeting that was given with Rick Cody, that Rick Cody was at that meeting, Rick Cody asked Doe the question about whether we should talk about Christian things. Of course, the posters had Christian things in them. And Doe's response that we have on tape was that, yes, you should learn about some of the Christian things so that when you talk to Christians, you can talk with knowledge about their terminology and what they think about and what they use in their objections. Not that we're trying to convert anybody. I don't care if they believe it or not, but the lower forces have so entangled people in the Christian community with their own interpretations and inaccurate interpretations and translation problems and just perception problems and complete understandings that are misunderstanding, that it's almost, like Doe said, it was almost impossible for Christians to change. But if it's possible, then if we have the ability to give them that help, then why wouldn't we do it? So I have that capacity. I have a lot of understanding about the Christian teachings relative to the events that I witnessed as being a member of the classroom. I was with the individual that was Jesus. I was with the individual that was Moses. I was with the individual that was Elijah. I was with the individual that was Enoch, and the individual that was Adam. I didn't make any of that up. T said that in the document that you can read in UFO Missionaries Extraordinary, that T and Doe designed the entire document at the end of that book that I've got posted on my blog, that says that Doe was that individual in all those cases. And so I feel like I need to keep on bringing this up so that a few people can have the opportunity to hear about the ways that they can actually point out to Christians that they're talking about Jesus, but they're ignoring the things that he talked about that reflected on T and Doe. That T and Doe were fulfilling the prophecies that T and Doe. Kathy's calling me, okay. With everybody in the stream, on the previous stream. And I saw that was happening. I must have hit something with my finger to share the screen. And I didn't know how to turn it off, and the screen was going crazy. It was like, sharing my screen 100 times. Anyway, so I'm going to delete that because it just shows a picture of Kathy, I think, kissing me on the cheek on my cell phone. So anyway, which I don't care about sharing that. I'm not trying to share it, but I wanted to talk about Christians and what they talk about. And I just, started this stream with talking about the tape where Doe told Riccone, answered his question about learning about what Christians were talking about in 1994. And I believe that applies to now, because I think everything that Tiendo gave us can apply to now. They didn't tell us to, only refer to the things said in tape number 112 or 110 or 1 or 50 or 364, blah, blah, blah. It's all up for our opportunity to share everything they were thinking, even the changes that they took. And I know anyway, so I just want to get to it with this one. And I just posted it on my Facebook page, Sawyer Heaven's Gate. A little tiny document. I didn't spend a lot of time on it because it was answer to a question that one of my Facebook friends had that he wasn't asking me about. He was asking general people about it on his own Facebook page. And he's not a believer in Tiendo, as far as I know. And I don't care if he is or not. It doesn't matter to me who believes in this and who doesn't. I mean, it's not that it doesn't matter to me as like a cold heart kind of thing. I enjoy when someone says they believe in it, in Tiendo and what they taught. But I know that doesn't necessarily mean they believe in everything that Tiendo taught. But it doesn't matter, because it's up to them to continue to go in that direction or not, and when and where and how and all that. The only job that I feel like I have is to share the information. And now Tiendo didn't talk about that much in the Bible, but they did say right in the very beginning, in 1975, that they felt like what Jesus said in the 4 Gospels was kept accurate enough by the Next Level's crew, so that that information would be available to people now, including Tiendo. They refer to things in those Gospels and in the book of Revelation on occasions. They didn't read chapter and verse except for that one time where Doe told us by himself in a meeting that he only came to by himself. And he said in Revelation 12:1, open up your Bibles. It's the only meeting that we had over 19 years that I recall, to where Doe said, bring your Bibles to the meeting, and that T didn't come to that meeting. And in that meeting, he said that Revelation 12:1 was talking about T. So, and that T was the woman in Revelation 12. And then if you look at that whole chapter, you can see all kinds of things in it that relate to things that Tiendo taught. But the average person isn't going to see that if they don't know the history really well. And it's hard to know the history really well unless you talk to somebody that was experiencing the history. And some of the people that experienced the history don't even believe in Tiendo anymore. Well, they don't want to talk about it. They don't remember it or whatever. They think that the Bible's not important, like Mark and Sarah told me. I don't know if they both told me that, but at least Mark did, I think, in an email where he said, you got to watch out for the book of Revelation, because, you got to be careful of that. Who is he to say what to be careful of in the book of Revelation? Unless he's quoting Doe. He's just being a mouthpiece for the lower forces to try to tell me that my book was of no value, because you got to be careful of the book of Revelation. You know, that's like something that Lucifer would say. I'm not saying Mark is Lucifer. I'm just saying that we can all be influenced by the lower forces, and that was one clear indication of somebody that was influenced by the lower forces. Anyway, I want to get back to, if he doesn't see that and he doesn't want to hear it, well, tough luck. I'm going to do what I feel like I need to do in order to bring things that Tiendo taught, including some of the parts of the book of Revelation, to the public when I feel led to do it. Anyway, so the next thing that I was going to talk about as far as that was, since we could rely on what Jesus said in the Gospels, not what the other disciples said in the Gospels, but what they wrote down, because they took notes according to Doe. That's another thing Doe said. That the reason why those gospel accounts are so similar, but then have parts of them that are different, is because there were different individuals taking notes and writing those things down. And those notes that were taken, because they weren't illiterate necessarily. Some might have been, but they weren't all illiterate. The next level probably even chose vehicles to send returning souls to take over those vehicles when those vehicles had school learning of the language and how to write and read, and even knowledge of some Greek maybe, I don't know, and Hebrew, Aramaic, whatever their common language was, because Koine is a type of Greek language that includes Hebrew and Greek. That happens in all societies, I believe, when there's multiple people from different nations migrating to those areas and bringing their native language to it, and then learning also the language of the area where the people were at the time. So anyway, before I get to my exit, where I'm going to close this, and not take any questions, but I'll look for questions in the chat briefly and try to answer them quickly, was the part about where Jesus said, I think it's in chapter 14 of John, the Gospel of John, and the whole chapter has all kinds of things in it talking about the Father. And one of them is where he says that those who love me will keep my commandments, and the Father and I will come to them and make our residence with him. They use the word abode, and that use of abode is, I forgot what the Greek word was, moni, I think, M-O-N-E, Monet, I'm not sure how to pronounce it in the Greek, but there was only 2 times that word was used, and one time was translated to abode, and the second, which is the case in 1423, and the second time it was translated to mansions, which is the proper translation, the more proper translation of that word, because it has to do with a place, a residence, a living area, a country, a city, a town, all having to do with geography of a place to live, which shows that they were going to come to the place. They weren't, and then you can see in the translations and the different interpretations, and even in the people that are putting together Strong's Concordance and things, you know, they give you multiple ways that it was translated, and one of them was that they were going to bring their authority, or that's what they said, kingdom, right? The kingdom was returning, and some Christians say that that just meant that the authority of the Lord was going to be coming back again. Didn't mean that the kingdom was coming back again. In other words, the kingdom's representatives, that's the kingdom coming back again. When the chief administrator of the Earth Project that is represented by T, comes back and takes a vehicle, the same way Jesus took a vehicle, that's the kingdom coming back, because the king is coming back. The king of that project, the earth project. And when the king comes back with their son, or the archangel, the captain of angels, which is the more generic terminology, the captain of messengers, the captain of crew members, this is the real truth. This is the way it really works. It's not that religious stuff. Okay, so when that happens, that's the team coming back. Okay, so it says we're going to make, and it uses the word plural, the plural pronoun of we is going to return. And then you look at the other verse in an associated chapter, and it says, in my Father's house are many mansions, and if it were not so, I would not have said that to you, that I'm going to come back and make my place with you. And he uses the word place. So that where you can be, I'm going to be. So mansions is house, also translated as. But their houses should be talked about as mansions, but yet they lived in a rich mansion, didn't they? A number of mansions we lived in at the time. Very large homes. Some of them were literally mansions on acreage with built-in swimming pools and built-in tennis courts and tennis court and outdoor tennis court, outdoor swimming pools. I could go through the list of about 4 or 5 different properties that had mansion-like qualities, and yet that also translates to being a mansion in the Father's house. The Father's house being the Father's domain, the older member's domain. That's the correct terminology, more correct than Father, because it's not a gender thing. And that's some of the new information that they were bringing. When he said that, I bring you new information that you cannot bear now. When he comes back, he said he would do that. And Christians have all kinds of ways of telling you that what he was referring to is when he came back through Paul, or when he came back through the book of Revelation, which has got some truth to it, but even that is misleading, because they talked about the end times at the end of the age when he would come back. And he talked about that as well. That's what he was talking about. He wasn't talking about immediately within that 70 years, but there's many Christians that talk about it that way. Now, I'm going to have to continue this because there's so many parts to it, including the way that the revealing was meant to be what was called now the book of Revelation, which they call the Apocalypse, which simply means the revealing time, the revealing of the truth. And that started with Tiendo in earnest, even though there were things that started before that in preparation for Tiendo, so that the vehicles would be open to the mind of the next level, like for gender consciousness. In other words, gender equality and racial equality, and there is no sexual equality in the next level because there is no sex. So they didn't bring that except for the way that people judge one another by their sexuality. That's kind of a bastardization of the whole equality point of view, because the next level doesn't care who you have sex with and who you love in that way. With that physical manifestation of what humans think of as love. Anyway, I'm just going to look at this. So, John S. says, Sawyer, good evening. I've heard a man named Teo on the Heaven's Gate podcast, what was his classroom name and how long was he with the class? Why did he leave? Yeah, I know who you're talking about. His also name was Theo, but I don't think he stayed in the group long enough to be given an Odie name. So he doesn't have an Odie name, and I don't really remember him except from the day after video and also from the Heaven's Gate podcast where he was interviewed for, and where I actually responded to what he said with what I believed was a little bit of criticism, because that's what I kind of do. Whether it's accurate or not, I try to be accurate in terms of the way T and Do were teaching and thinking and what actually happened. And so I was the Heaven's Gate podcast, I think the first one, which you can see my responses to on my blog, sawyerhg.wordpress.com, that talks about all those 10 different Heaven's Gate podcasts. And there's an index file to all my critiques of that Heaven's Gate podcast. And I suggest you look at it just to get, another point of view of what they were saying in those podcasts. And then you can make your own mind up of whether it makes sense to you or not. Anyway, so, I see there were more conversations going on in here. Old School Dave, hello. Hello, says, hi Casey. What am I doing? Hitting that for? A late stream. Yeah, it's late because I'm coming back from work. And no sound, 737. I guess, I don't know what happened with that. You got no sound now? That's bad news. You hear him now, 737, question mark? Go on, sound here, Kathy. I can hear him. Okay, I don't know what that was about, 737. Oh, I see, yeah. Well, Kathy Southwestern's got colors on the end of her name too now because of her streaming. And I guess there's nothing else being talked about. So I'll talk to you all more about all these Christian things and answer your questions as I do streams. And so I'm sorry this was so discombobulated to begin with, but that's just the way I roll sometimes. All right, so good night, folks.